The first frost of winter had just begun to creep across the fields of Millfield when the stranger arrived, a man in a suit too sharp for their quiet dirt road town. Jake McCullough wiped his hands on his overalls, watching from the porch of his weathered farmhouse as the black sedan rolled to a stop at the edge of his property. Something about the way the man stepped out, polished shoes sinking into the mud, set Jake's teeth on edge. This wasn't a neighbor. This wasn't a friend. And when the stranger pulled a thick envelope from his briefcase, Jake knew whatever was inside would change everything. For generations, the McCulloughs had worked this land. Jake's father had taught him to plant corn in straight rows under a wide-open sky. His mother had hung laundry on the line where the wind carried the scent of wildflowers. Now, at 58, Jake was the last of them, just him and his daughter, Lily, who'd inherited her mother's fierce eyes and his stubborn heart. The farm wasn't much, but it was theirs, or so he'd believed. The stranger introduced himself as Troy Mercer, a representative of Blackthorn AgriCorp. His smile was all teeth, no warmth. "Mr. McCullough," he said, sliding the envelope across the kitchen table, "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. This land was sold to us months ago. The paperwork's all here." Jake's calloused fingers trembled as he flipped through pages dense with legal jargon and his own forged signature. The debts they claimed he owed were lies. The sale was a sham. But Troy's voice dripped with false sympathy. "We're prepared to offer you a generous relocation package. Of course, if you refuse, well, the law's on our side." Outside, Lily crouched in the garden, her small hands buried in the soil, unaware that the life she knew was about to shatter. Jake's grip tightened on the papers. He'd faced droughts, storms, even the grief of burying his wife. But this was a fight he hadn't seen coming. And as Troy's smirk widened, Jake made a silent vow. No corporate suit would steal his home, not while he was still breathing. But what Jake didn't know, what none of them knew, was that by sundown, the quiet of Millfield would be shattered by the roar of helicopters. And the men stepping out of the shadows wouldn't be there for the land. They'd be there for him. The morning after Troy Mercer's visit, Jake McCullough stood at the edge of his cornfield, the forged eviction notice crumpled in his fist. The early light painted the land gold, but all he could see were shadows creeping in. He'd spent the night wide awake, replaying Troy's smug threats in his mind. Blackthorn AgriCorp thought they could bully him off his land with lies and paperwork. They didn't know Jake or the people of Millfield. By noon, word had spread through town like wildfire. Old man Higgins from the feed store showed up with a shotgun slung over his shoulder. Martha from the diner brought a casserole and a list of every lawyer in the county. Even the Thompson kids, barely teenagers, arrived with handmade signs. "Hands off McCullough Farm." But Troy wasn't done. On the third day, a fleet of Blackthorn trucks rolled in, kicking up dust as they circled Jake's property. Men in security uniforms fanned out, snapping photos of the barn, the fences, the house, like vultures sizing up a dying animal. Jake met them at the gate, Lily clutching the hem of his coat. "You got no right to be here," he growled. The lead guard just smirked. "Due diligence, old man. This'll all be ours soon anyway." That night, Jake woke to the sound of splintering wood. By the time he reached the field, it was too late. Rows of young corn lay trampled, the earth gouged by tire tracks. Lily's voice was small in the dark. "Daddy, who would do this?" The answer came at dawn. Troy returned, this time flanked by two lawyers. "A shame about your crops," he said, not even pretending to care. "Accidents happen when people refuse to cooperate." Jake's hands shook, not with fear, but with a rage so deep it scared him. He took a step forward, and for a second Troy's smirk faltered. But before Jake could speak, a new voice cut through the tension. "Problem here." Captain Daniel Reyes stood at the edge of the driveway, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. Retired Navy, if the tattoo on his forearm was any clue. He'd been drifting through town for a week, staying at the motel by the highway. Jake had seen him at the diner, quiet but always watching. Now Reyes was watching Troy. "You're trespassing," Reyes said, matter of fact. Troy scoffed. "This is a legal matter, stay out of it." But Reyes didn't flinch. He just pulled out his phone and snapped a photo of Troy's license plate. "Funny," he murmured. "Guy like you driving a company car. Bet Blackthorn's HR department would love to know about those assault charges you've got in 3 states. Troy paled. The lawyers exchanged glances. Within minutes they were gone, but not before Troy hissed one last threat at Jake. "This isn't over." As the taillights faded, Reyes finally turned to Jake. "You've got a target on your back now," he said quietly, "but you're not alone." He nodded toward Lily, who was peeking through the curtains. "She filmed everything last night. That footage, it's evidence." Jake's throat tightened. He'd been so focused on fighting, he hadn't realized. His 12-year-old daughter had just armed them with the truth. But neither of them knew yet that Troy's threat wasn't just hot air. Because 200 miles away, in a sleek high-rise office, a man in a $5,000 suit was studying Jake's file, and he'd just given the order to escalate things. By nightfall, the real battle would begin. The crickets had gone silent. That was the first thing Jake noticed as he paced the farmhouse porch just past midnight, the weight of Ray's warning pressing on his chest like a stone. Every creak of the old wood, every rustle of the wind through the cornstalk set his nerves on edge. Lily was finally asleep upstairs, her phone clutched in her hand, the damning footage of Blackthorn's thugs still saved on it. Ray's had promised to return at dawn with help, but Jake couldn't shake the feeling they were out of time. Then the dogs started barking, not the usual grumbles at raccoons or deer, but a frantic, snarling chorus that sent Jake sprinting for his shotgun. He barely made it off the porch before the world erupted in light. When beams from a black SUV sliced through the darkness, skidding to a stop at the edge of the property. Jake raised his gun, finger hovering near the trigger, until the doors flew open and 4 men in tactical gear spilled out. Not Blackthorn's rent-a-cops. These moved like shadows, their rifles scanning the tree line in perfect unison. Jake's breath caught. Navy SEALs, here, on his farm. The lead operator, Commander Briggs, his name-tape read, stepped forward, his voice low but carrying like a blade. "Mr. McCullough, we need you inside now." The kitchen became a war room. Maps and laptops covered the table as Briggs laid it out. Troy Mercer wasn't just some corporate bully. He was a fugitive, real name Ethan Cole, a dishonorably discharged Marine who'd spent years running investment scams targeting veterans. Blackthorn AgriCorp was his latest shell company, built to launder millions stolen from families like Jake's, families with land, with history, with no one powerful to fight back. "He picked you because you're isolated," Briggs said, tapping Jake's deed on the table. But he didn't count on Ray's recognizing him from the diner. Jake's knees nearly gave out. All this time he'd thought he was fighting for his home. Turns out he'd stumbled into something far bigger. Outside, the night exploded into action. 2 SEAL teams moved like ghosts through the cornfields, setting up a perimeter. A drone buzzed overhead, its infrared camera hunting for heat signatures. Briggs handed Jake an earpiece just as Ray's voice crackled through. "Got movement at the old Thompson silo, 6 hostiles, armed." Jake's blood turned to ice. Troy, no, Ethan had brought his own team, and they were closing in. The firefight lasted less than 3 minutes. Later, Jake would only remember flashes, the staccato burst of gunfire from the tree line. The SEAL sniper on his roof taking down 2 men with shots so precise they barely disturbed the leaves. The moment Ethan himself broke cover, sprinting for the SUV, only to be tackled by Ray's in a tackle that would have made his old football coach proud. When the cuffs clicked shut, Ethan screamed something about lawyers, about connections, but Briggs just yanked him to his feet. "Know what your mistake was," the commander growled. "Thinking a farmer with nothing left to lose wouldn't have the entire United States Navy at his back." Dawn broke over a scene Jake could barely process. State troopers hauled away Ethan's crew. News vans clustered at the end of the driveway, reporters shouting questions about the veteran vigilante who brought down $1 million scam. And in the middle of it all stood Lily, her eyes wide as Briggs knelt to hand her a challenge coin from his pocket. "For bravery under fire," he said solemnly. She turned it over, NSWDG etched into the metal, and grinned like she'd just won the lottery. But the real victory came an hour later, when a gray-haired man in a Coast Guard windbreaker pulled up in an unmarked car. Jake recognized him instantly. Admiral James Whitmore, the man whose signature had been forged on half the Blackthorn documents. He gripped Jake's shoulder so hard it hurt. "Your father served with me in Nam," he said, voice rough. "When Ray's called saying his kid was in trouble, let's just say the Pentagon moved faster than it has since 9/11. He slid an envelope across the hood of Jake's truck. New deeds, properly notarized, with Blackthorn's claims nullified in bold red stamps. As the Admiral's chopper lifted off, Jake finally let himself crumple against the porch rail. The farm was his. Lily was safe. And somewhere in a federal holding cell, Ethan Cole was learning what happened when you underestimated both farmers and SEALs. But one question burned in Jake's throat as Ray's walked over, sipping terrible motel coffee. "Why'd you really help us?" Ray's just nodded at Lily, now teaching a SEAL how to milk the goats. "Let's just say, I owed your old man a debt." The way he said it left no room for argument. Some stories, Jake realized, were better left unfolding in their own time. The first sprouts of new corn broke through the soil exactly 2 weeks after the SEALs left. Jake knelt in the field, letting the damp earth sift through his fingers as the morning sun warmed his back. Behind him, the rhythmic pounding of hammers echoed across the property. Half the town had shown up at dawn to rebuild the fence Ethan's men had destroyed. Even Sheriff Dawson was there, sleeves rolled up as he wrestled with a stubborn post. "Never thought I'd see the day," Martha called from the picnic table where she doled out lemonade, "when the whole county would line up to take orders from a 12-year-old. Lily, perched on a hay bale with Commander Briggs' challenge coin glinting around her neck, grinned and pointed at a group of teenagers struggling with a tarp. "That one's crooked. Do it again." Ray's found Jake by the old oak tree at the property line, where the land sloped down toward the creek. He wasn't wearing his usual leather jacket today, just a faded Marines t-shirt that revealed scars Jake hadn't noticed before. For a long moment they just watched the water swirl around the rocks. Then Ray's reached into his pocket. The black and white photo was creased with age, a group of young soldiers in Vietnam, grinning under the jungle canopy. Jake's breath caught. There in the center, his father, barely older than Lily is now, arms slung around a dark-haired private. "Private Daniel Reyes," the stranger said quietly. "My uncle. Your dad carried him 3 miles after an ambush. Never made it to the medevac." Jake's hands trembled as he traced the edges of the photo. All these years he'd thought his father's war stories were just that, stories. But the look in Ray's eyes told him everything. This wasn't just about land. This was about a promise made decades ago in the blood and mud of a foreign war. The truth settled over Jake like a weight lifting. That's why Reyes had been drifting through Millfield, why he'd recognized Ethan's telltale limp from military records, why he'd called in favors from men who owed debts to ghosts. As if reading his mind, Reyes nudged a stone into the creek with his boot. "Uncle Danny wrote about your dad in his letters, said if he ever made it home, he'd find his family, look after them." He met Jake's gaze. "Took me 40 years, but seals keep their word." Back at the house, the party was in full swing. Someone had strung lanterns between the barn and the farmhouse, their golden light flickering as dusk settled over the fields. Lily dragged Jake to the center of the impromptu dance floor, where Admiral Whitmore was attempting, and failing, to teach a group of SEALs the Cotton Eye Joe. The video of Blackthorn's thugs vandalizing the farm had gone viral, sparking investigations in 3 states. Ethan's mugshot flashed on someone's phone beneath the headline, "Fake executive exposed as serial scammer." Even the Thompson kids had become minor celebrities, their protest signs displayed behind the local news anchor. But as the music swelled and Martha's famous apple pie made the rounds, Jake slipped away to the porch. The farm smelled like fresh-cut wood and barbecue like hope. Reyes joined him, 2 bottles of beer in hand. They clinked them together in silence, watching as Lily convinced Commander Briggs to let her try on his night vision goggles. "She's something else," Reyes murmured. Jake didn't trust himself to speak. The words were too big: gratitude, grief, the dizzying understanding that his father's legacy had saved them all. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pressed his dad's old dog tags into Ray's palm. The metal was warm from his skin. Ray's fingers closed around them without a word. Some debts, Jake realized, weren't meant to be repaid, just passed forward like seeds in good soil. The fireworks started at midnight, not the store-bought kind, but proper artillery simulators courtesy of the SEALs. Each explosion painted the sky in red and white, the colors shimmering across the repaired barn roof, the new crops, the faces of everyone who'd fought for this moment. Lily whooped as a particularly bright burst illuminated the entire property, her laughter carrying on the wind. Jake closed his eyes, memorizing the sound. However the story ended, this chapter was enough, more than enough. As the last sparks faded, Reyes shouldered his duffel bag. "Time to stop drifting," was all he said. Jake didn't ask where he was going. Some questions, like some stories, didn't need answers. He just clasped the man's forearm, feeling the old scar tissue beneath his fingers. Proof of battles fought, promises kept. The headlights of Ray's motorcycle disappeared down the dirt road just as the first fireflies emerged, their tiny lights dancing above the corn like stars come down to earth. Inside, Lily was already asleep on the couch, Briggs' challenge coin still clutched in her hand. Jake draped a quilt over her shoulders, his heart so full it ached. However the world unfolded next, they'd face it together. And that, he thought as he turned out the lights, was the greatest victory of all. The morning sun painted Jake's freshly repaired barn in golden light as he adjusted the camera on its tripod. Lily fidgeted beside him, her SEAL challenge coin gleaming on her overalls. "Do we really have to do this, Dad?" she groaned, but the spark in her eyes betrayed her excitement. Jake hit record and took a deep breath, the words coming easier than he expected. "3 weeks ago, corporate suits tried to steal my family's land," he began, his calloused hands framing the thriving crops behind him. "But what they didn't count on was you." The camera panned to show the rebuilt fences, the the Millfield Strong mural painted by neighbors, the spot where Ethan Cole had been tackled, now marked by a single sunflower Lily had planted. Lily snatched the microphone, her voice bright with mischief. And they really didn't count on Navy SEALs. The video cut to shaky cell phone footage, the midnight raid. The moment Ethan realized his game was over, the SEALs moving through cornfields like shadows. Jake's narration turned serious as the screen split to show news reports about other farmers targeted by similar scams. Ethan wasn't the only one. Right now, someone just like him is bullying families in towns just like ours. The image changed again, this time to the Admiral's handwritten list of resources, government contacts, and warning signs of land fraud. The ink smudged from being photocopied at the feed store. The camera zoomed in on Jake's face, the lines around his eyes deepened by sunlight and survival. So here's what I need from you. His finger pointed directly at the viewer. First, share this with anyone who owns land or loves someone who does. Those PDFs in the description, they're armor. Lily popped into frame holding Jake's father's dog tags. Second, she said with surprising gravity, if you're a veteran getting screwed over, comment below. My dad's teaching me to answer every single one. The screen filled with thumbnails of other small farms, other families, a visual baton pass of solidarity. As the video faded to black, Jake's final words hung in the air. They think we're just little people. Show them how strong little people can be together. The ending shot lingered on the farm's new sign, carved from salvaged barn wood. McCullough and Daughter S. 1985 and 2024. No music swelled, no dramatic filters enhanced the image. Just truth, simple and unshakable as the land itself. Off camera, Lily could be heard demanding pancakes, her coin clinking against her juice glass. The real victory wasn't in the dramatic rescue or viral fame, but in the ordinary morning that followed and all the mornings after, each one defiantly, beautifully theirs.